So much to say. And yeah, we talked a lot about Bo Nix. Yeah, we talked a lot about Jarrett Stidham. Now, today, it's time to talk about Zach Wilson. Now, Mace, if you watched yesterday's shows, I already said Wilson looked bad. You were a little kinder. But let's talk about Zach Wilson and kind of his last hurrah here with Sean Payton.
Yeah, it's wild to think of it in those terms, like you said, last hurrah. He's only in year 4, right? But he has 3 years as a starter with 2 offensive coordinators, although you can say one of them, Nathaniel Hackett, really out of his depth. But there's a sample size there with Zach Wilson. It's not like there's as much unknown as there is with other quarterback prospects. Drew Locke, there's a little more unknown there because he had, 5 games in the 2019 season and then 13 games in 2020 and then 3 in 2021, right? So you're talking about 5, 13, 18, 21 games, right? With Zach Wilson, you're talking about the better part of 3 seasons as the starter. And that's why he's in this 1/3 quarterback competition, basically getting 1/3 of the first team reps. And this might be his last chance to be a starter. If it doesn't work out, Zach Wilson's future, if it is in the NFL, is probably as a career backup.
Now, I don't want to belabor this, Mace, but it's fascinating how we started this conversation because your top 5 quarterbacks, your top first rounders, they get more chances, but they actually get less chances because when it's shown they can't be the guy, it's almost as if they're just thrown away, I'd bring up like a Carson Wentz when it turned out that he just wasn't going to be the guy. No one even wants him around. And I feel like that could be the same thing for Zach Wilson.
But with Carson Wentz, he had enough positives on his CV from Philadelphia. I mean, go back to 2017, looked like he was going to be the MVP before he tore his ACL.
Right.
Yes, Nick Foles guided them in the playoffs, but Philadelphia was not a better team with Nick Foles. They were actually a more efficient offensive operation with Carson Wentz. Foles in that divisional round against Atlanta was very pedestrian, as you recall. So Wentz had enough on that resume to where he got the shot with Indianapolis and then got another shot with Washington, although it ended up being brief because he struggled. It took 2 more times falling short for him to go into clear backup range, which is what he is now in Kansas City. Zach Wilson doesn't have any kind of success. Like, unlike Carson Wentz, Zach Wilson can't say, oh, I was the quarterback for a playoff team. Oh, I was the primary starter for a team that won it all. No, there's nothing like that on Zach Wilson's resume. So you basically get kind of one more shot. But the point is, you do get another shot if you're like top 5 pick, unless you're Trey Lance. Although I think with Trey Lance, there's an exceptional set of circumstances, and there's still something yet to be written. I think whether it's the Cowboys moving on from Dak Prescott next year in free agency or the Cowboys trading him, I think there is at least a QB competition, a chance to win the number 1 job in Trey Lance's future. Whereas, because he's a top 5 pick, whereas someone like Mac Jones, for instance, who was not a top 5 pick, who was down in the teens, I'm not sure there's another chance. If you're a top 5 pick, you get at least one more shot. This is Zach Wilson's one more shot.
This is Zach Wilson's one more shot, and he gets to do it with Sean Payton, which is awesome for him because if Sean Payton can fix you, well, nobody really can. Zach Wilson, who we talked to after OTAs, had some things to say about SP. Here's what Zach Wilson had to say.
Hard to point to things, exactly right now because it's kind of rep by rep. As we do something out on the field, he'll come by and give some, hey, on this play, based on my experience of doing it for as long as I have, you can kind of expect this or, tempo this drop a little bit, little things here and there.
That was me asking him what kind of guidance that Sean Payton is giving him right now. And that was his answer. Like, It was funny. He said it was hard to kind of point to things specifically, and then he pointed to something specific.
Right. And what he's
which I
pointing to is
appreciate.
tempo. He
Yes.
pointed to tempo, which is timing.
Yeah.
He pointed to footwork. How often did we talk about footwork yesterday? Like, he pointed to things that matter to Sean Payton, which is getting the ball out on time.
Yeah. And as we talk about a lot, it starts with the feet.
Mhm.
That's where your rhythm and timing begin. And if your footwork is inconsistent, your timing is going to be inconsistent. And that's going to cause Sean Payton to very slowly go mad as he's sitting there on the sidelines.
Yeah.
So it drove him mad last year.
It did. It did.
No doubt about that.
And Zach Wilson does have some Russell Wilson to his game where he's going to hold on to the ball too long. He's going to take chances that he doesn't need to. We saw it in one day of practice. We saw Zach Wilson look kind of like Zach Wilson.
Yeah. I've said it a few times. If you think Russell Wilson caused a lot of sacks, wait until you watch the film of Zach Wilson. That's a real problem. And that's part of why the trade for him was a little bit curious. Yes, he has those high-level traits that made him the number 2 overall pick, albeit coming off the COVID year. And I look at that 2021 first round as a collective, and right now it's looking like 4 out of 5 misses at the quarterback position. And I look at that low success rate and I say, okay, it's because we had bad information from a year where there were few to no fans in the stands and you could operate in a very pristine environment to run an offense. And then Zach Wilson on top of that didn't play a Power 5 team on the schedule because of how things worked for BYU that year scheduling wise. The toughest team that he played was Coastal Carolina, toughest defense that he played, and he didn't play well. So I thought there were some alarm bells already ringing on Zach Wilson being a number 2 overall pick.
Oh, yeah.
Coming out. But he does have the traits. However, he does, and we saw this Thursday, he drifts back. Like when he's trying to buy time, he's moving backwards. Whereas one thing that we did see from Bo Nix on Thursday, when he was under pressure, he's stepping up to try to get out of it. He is climbing the pocket. And that was something that really jumped out to me, how it's part of how pocket awareness, feel for the pass rush are things you can't coach, because Bo Nix walks in and already is at a much more advanced level in those specific aspects than Zach Wilson, who is now in his 4th year in the league, which I think is key. But that being said, does Zach Wilson have more arm strength, more velocity than Bo Nix? Absolutely. We saw some howitzers from Zach Wilson on Thursday. No surprise. Basically, if you watch Zach Wilson the last 3 years, that's what you saw Thursday.
Yeah. And that's why I say not great, Bob, but it's early, Mace.
Yes.
I'm willing to give him time. I drive you crazy when I say that. But like, we're willing to give him more time. It's super early, but it was okay. This is what you're working with. Now, what can you do to get it better? Wilson talked about what he needs to do better. And this answer was right on the money, in my opinion.
Yeah, I need to be consistent every single day, understanding the offense, understanding what I'm asked to do, taking care of the football, and then how quickly can I get the ball to my hands to play some playmakers we have to.
Consistent. Perfect. And getting the ball to the playmakers. So it's be consistent. And then getting the ball to the playmakers, that is what Sean Payton wants, quarterback as point guard.
Yes.
Distribution. Look, if the Broncos don't have a clear wide receiver 1 this year, based on what they're doing schematically, because I'm not sure that Courtland Sutton's skill set fits exactly what the Broncos want to do on offense. But maybe a successful season for this offense in the passing game involves 4 different guys catching 40 to 50 passes. Distribution, spreading it around. Maybe there's not 1,000-yard receiver, but there's 4 to 5 that are 500 plus. And you're building it in the aggregate, but also when you do that, one of 2 things happened. One is bad. You had guys get hurt constantly, and you were having to churn. The other thing is the quarterback's throwing to the open man, not caring what the name is on the back of the jersey. It's just see target, throw to target. And, it's Josh Reynolds on this play. It's Marvin Mims Jr. on this play. This time it's Jaleel McLaughlin out of the backfield. By the way, McLaughlin looked good on Thursday too, I thought.
Yes. Yeah, he looked good in space. He looked like Jaleel would look.
He looked, and he was getting the ball out in stride a little bit more.
Cleanly.
Yes, there was some explosive potential there. I liked it. There were some glimpses of things. Like we can say with Zach Wilson, for example, he is who we thought he was. Doesn't mean he can't go to a different place, but so far, 1 week in, basically what he was with the Jets.
Right.
But we saw there were enough other little things that look different, and we'll get into this on another show this weekend, that really, I think that they're really exciting. And Jaleel McLaughlin getting the ball out in front in stride was one of those things.
How long does football rehab take then? We've discussed football rehab with Zach Wilson specifically, but because you and I laid eyes on him and we saw him look the same and we saw the same problems, my mind goes to, well, it's not just as easy as the Jets are terrible and there's something there. It's like, okay, there is physically, but he's got a lot of work to do.
You've got to get him out of ingrained behaviors. That's the thing. And sometimes that never happens. Drew Locke is a perfect example of a quarterback who on the practice field can ingest the information and apply it in practice. You see, there's better process. There's better decision-making. There's better footwork. I can point to a bunch of instances in 2021 training camp where you could see that there was growth there. But then you get things under duress, and it's a reversion to ingrained habits. It's playing hero ball, questionable decision-making. Bengals fumble.
Right. There you go.
I didn't identify the man on the edge. And that's what you worry about. Like in minicamp, because I'm going to say, let's go 3 weeks out here. In minicamp, maybe he's making better decisions. And that would be exciting, right? I mean, I think we'd be thrilled to see a different kind of Zach Wilson. But the proof is going to come when you actually put him out there against somebody else. Is that going to be in preseason? It depends what the opponent throws at you.
Pretty vanilla in the preseason.
Yes, and not only that, you may not see a first-team defense in the preseason. In a preseason game, you go Colts, Packers, Cardinals. Cardinals is the preseason game at the end, obviously. Packers, you're going to have 1 day of joint practice. That's where I think you'll see the work. Basically, I think it might be that Packers joint practice where if Zach Wilson's making a lot of progress, we have a rubber meets the road moment.
Yes. Yeah. But that's how long it's going to take.
Yeah.
To get to a determining factor right now, we just don't know.
It's nearly 3 months out, right? And so it's probably wise to not come to conclusions here. Now, we'll probably have a very different discussion coming out of minicamp based on how far he's come, if there has been palpable progress. I mean, we don't see the next couple of practices, but we see them next Thursday. We see them Thursday after, then we see them in 3 days. For 3 days following that. Will he have grown by then? Perhaps, but even then, we'll have to sit there and say, to use a Star Wars quote that we've used once before this week, good against remotes is one thing. Good against the living, that's something else. We don't know. Yeah. Practice is good against remotes. Actually going against another team, that's good against the living.
Well, and for me, Mace, and we didn't really get into this, but yesterday and just watching Bo Nix, okay, there's flashes. It wasn't perfect, but okay, work on that. I was just going, what do I see from Stidham versus what do I see from Wilson? And even though I was unimpressed with Stidham because I wanted more fire, and he did crescendo, which is great. It's Stidham. Stidham's the number 2 right now.
Yes.
You know, I know somebody on our YouTube show yesterday, they commented like, Wilson, he's going to win the thing. I'm like, okay, I mean, maybe, but he didn't look like he was close to that.
Right. Now, we saw him with threes and against threes, and so part of me is hoping next week that we see either Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson run with the ones. If we don't see next week, if it's 1-2-3, 1-2-3 each week, then based on the rotation, we would see Bo Nix next week. And then because there are 4 practices the week after that, we would see Jarrett Stidham. So we may not see Zach Wilson with the ones if they go 1-2-3, 1-2-3 until minicamp. And I'd like to see that. Because Bo Nix did have some rough moments on Thursday with the ones. How smooth is it for Jarrett Stidham running with the ones?
Right. And then what do we see from Zach Wilson? We know that Sean Payton knows he's got different quarterbacks. And, well, yesterday he talked about that.
They come from different systems. One's coming from college. One's coming from 2 or 3 NFL systems. And the other is coming from one system. They're all in a race to learn this system. And I would say, you guys watch the practice. Man, they're doing well.
A race to learn this system, Mace.
Yes. A race. How fast can they ingest it?
Okay. I think Zach Wilson's bringing up the rear. 1 day of practice.
Well, Stidham's going to be ahead. I mean, that's the thing.
Yes.
Jarrett Stidham has an advantage here.
Yes.
Now, his disadvantage is team building / salary cap. Because if Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham are equals, because Bo Nix is making the team, whether Bo Nix is starting week 1 or he's the backup, he's making the team. Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson may be competing for one job on the roster. If they're equal, do you go with the quarterback who was a number 2 overall pick and has that physical talent? Say this for Zach Wilson. He can move. He can make some explosive plays with his legs when he goes forward. It's a part of his game. He's got the strongest arm of the 3 quarterbacks around the Broncos. And then on top of that, if it's Wilson and Stidham tied, you talk about Zach Wilson's attributes, and you also talk about Jarrett Stidham. If you cut him, you save $5 million on the cap. It's not the most important thing. If Jarrett Stidham is even a smidgen ahead of Zach Wilson, Stidham will stick.
Yes.
Even with the $5 million. Make that clear. But if they're tied and you're looking for a tiebreaker circumstance, it might be something like that.
That's why it's a nice thing the ownership group isn't penny pinchers, but it is something.
Right.
If they're tied, they will look for tiebreakers. But Stidham yesterday,
ownership can't create more cap space, those seats. That's the problem.
Right.
If it could, believe me, if they could have created more cap space, they would have, and you would have seen a different roster this year. You'd probably see Justin Simmons still on the team, for example. But when you're navigating $85 million of dead cap over 2 years, you had to make some tough choices. Well,
now I'm thinking of Tommy Boy because, like, maybe he plays for the Yankees. If this was baseball and you could spend whatever, the Broncos would be the Yankees.
Luxury tax. That's all you'd worry about, right? You got a luxury tax in the NBA. You got a luxury tax in baseball. Yeah, I think they would have gone over the luxury tax this year to account for losing Russell Wilson if they could have. And it's actually interesting to think, if you were in an uncapped environment, is Zach Wilson even here? Or do they say, oh, Minnesota's going to $10 million for Sam Darnold, we're going to go to 11?
Right. Oh,
Spinal
turn
tap.
it up to 11. Spinal
Yes.
tap. Who's your favorite little rascal? Jarrett Stidham didn't answer that, but he did talk about being the vet yesterday.
Look, I was fortunate enough, my rookie year, I was competing with Brian Hoyer for the backup job in New England behind Tom. And Hoy had been in the system for 7-8 years or whatever it was, and he did nothing but help me. So, I want to help these guys learn as much as they can. And like I said, I'm the vet in the room. So anything that I've picked up over the years, like I tell those guys, and certain little thoughts or tricks that I have, I share it. But yeah, at the same time, we're all in it together and we're all competing, and that's what we have to do.
I need to go back and find the Joe Flacco quote from 5
Right,
years ago
right.
that we've
It's not my
referenced.
job.
Yeah, because that's a perfect answer. I know you want to see some more fire from Jarrett Stidham. I get that. But at the same time, we know all roads eventually lead to Bo Nix.
Yes.
Jarrett Stidham's not going to have a problem with that.
He knows
There's a scenario. Yeah, there's a scenario, Cease, where Jarrett Stidham is still on this team next year and the year after and the year after that.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we're talking about Zach Wilson, let's bring this up. Who makes Bo Nix better? Because Zach Wilson will do things that you can't describe, right? Because of that arm.
Yes.
So he'll do stuff that's off script. It's like you can't replicate that. Jarrett Stidham, with his steadiness and his knowledge of the offense, actually makes Bo Nix better. So if you want a tiebreaker, there's my tiebreaker.
That's really interesting to think about, because there are clubs in Zach Wilson's bag that Bo Nix just doesn't possess.
Yeah.
It works the other way as well, but some of the Bo Nix clubs are more about being teachable, learning, ingesting, processing, and all that. One thing that I think Bo Nix has that Zach Wilson can't get to is Nix feels the pass rush much better. He anticipates it. That's something you cannot coach. Feel for the rush, especially coming from outside of your field of vision. Either you have it or you don't. Based on what we watched on Thursday with the ones, and it was a good day for the pass rush. Tip my cap to Nick Benito in particular, who was a force out there. But Nix was able to sense it and step away from it and not drift. Again, climb the pocket, move around, buy some time. I think it was the play to Lucas Kroll or Tim Patrick, where basically he just darted around, didn't retreat, did some side steps, made somebody miss, a little shuffle, and then stepped into the throw. And that was a good moment for Bo Nix, and it was a good moment to watch. Like I got a little thrill up my leg seeing that. I'm not gonna lie.
I like that.
Yeah.
We'll see what more thrills we can get out there. We do have 2 more clips to play here on Zach Wilson, and we'll get done with today's show. What was the Phil Simms thing? Where was this from? They were on their show.
This was from the Unbuttoned podcast with Phil Simms joining his son, the host Chris Simms. And they had a longer talk about Broncos quarterbacks. We're going to get into that later in the weekend. But he did have a conversation about Zach Wilson and a comment specifically that I think underscores the urgency of the moment for Zach Wilson.
I'm interested to see Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I hear you.
Now, he's not Sean Payton's kind of guy.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting if he has a little flavor just for him.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
I know.
If Sean Payton doesn't fix him,
Nobody
Zach have a
is.
good life.
He said doesn't.
Yeah, but that's
I say
it.
doesn't
Like
sometimes too.
Yeah, like have a good life. I mean, this is it. He's getting 1/3 of the first team snaps, and this may be his best shot to start again. Yes, all roads lead to Bo Nix, but if Zach Wilson makes palpable progress in the next few months, they'll start Zach Wilson in week 1. If he's the best quarterback in those 3 right now, he will start in Seattle. And then it becomes a 1-year audition. Like I said, all roads lead to Bo Nix. 1 year, maybe it's even like several weeks. But if Zach Wilson plays well enough to hold off Bo Nix to start half the season, maybe even more than half the season, and does reasonably well, I'm not saying somebody is handing Zach Wilson the keys, but he could play himself back into the kind of spot that Sam Darnold is, where Sam Darnold has a good chance to be the week 1 starter in Minnesota and has a good chance to get a season to start and show that he can do it. Denver may be a step for Zach Wilson on the way back, but he's got to start by earning the job over the next few months. And that's why he's got to make the most of these 1/3 starters reps. Eventually, though, Sean Payton said it's, going to change. Like, it's going to evolve. Like, right now, don't read anything into it. But what if we're sitting there by minicamp week and maybe Bo Nix hasn't made the progress they want, and it's come down to Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson splitting the first team reps 50-50. Or maybe Stidham has stalled and it's Zach Wilson and Bo Nix splitting the reps 50-50. There are all sorts of possibilities there. But if we go out there for minicamp and it's Stidham and Bo Nix splitting first team reps 50-50 and Zach Wilson with the threes,
we've seen
it is becoming Zach Wilson career backup.
I do love our dear friends in the media as we wrap up today's show, Mace, because you and I will nerd out on football with Chris Thomason, and there are others. Love Leggy,
yes.
Love all
Parker Gabriel's another good football
my
guy.
God, when there's something that everyone can get, it's like chum in the water. When the orphan dog thing happened, and it was just like, now everyone's like, "What kind of dog are you?" Zach was asked about it.
Okay.
Here's what he had to say.
I mean, we've gone through it, right? I mean, you can see why it's been 3 years of tough challenges, but at the end, that's what makes you stronger, and you just need somebody to believe in you and believe in yourself and be able to just keep working hard and getting better.
If you were an orphan dog, what kind of dog would you be?
Ooh, I'm a husky guy. I like huskies. I've got a couple huskies at home. Tender loving.
How do you think Bo Nix, Oregon Duck, feels about Husky being Zach Wilson's favorite?
Wants to beat his ass.
Little Pacific Northwest rivalry thing there. Hey, if Zach Wilson starts week 1, we'll bring that quote back up again.
For sure.
Then that'll have some relevance. Going back to Seattle, home of the Washington Huskies.
Right.
Oh, my gosh.
There we go.
But yeah, TV. But it was a TV question, and it was cute, and it got, it moved the needle. It's May. It doesn't have to all be heavy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, but it doesn't have to be heavy. I guess the thing is, though, like, we've got a limited amount of time to ask these guys questions, so you got to make them count. I think you and I do try to make our questions count a little bit. But
yeah, I want to talk ball. Sean Payton wants to talk ball when he's feeling better. But
Bo Nix wants to talk ball.
Oh, God, all the time.
He loves talking ball.
That's the best way to get a great answer from him. Ask him about ball. It's not going to give you much other than that. We give you plenty, Mace, because we have Saturday show, Sunday show. Like, we're doing it again.
Holiday weekend. What's that?
Yeah, exactly. So we've got it all for you on Orange and Blue today. But how can you help us out on YouTube?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell
so that you never miss a vid. That's right. He is Andrew Mason. Follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's BFD. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay tuned, and would you please stay frosty.